What does a dream of water leaking in house spaces mean? If you've ever had a dream of water in a house, you can easily be forgiven for forgetting about your dream. In fact, this type of dream imagery or night vision is easy to overlook. Of all the possible nighttime visions you could have, stretching anywhere from seeing alligators, goats, dragons, demons, witches, cannibals, zombies, a dream of water leaking somewhere in a house looks very innocent indeed. In fact, it's so easy to forget that's precisely what people do. But this is all a mistake. General dream interpretation of water leaking. If the central focus of your dream involves water leaking from any part of your house, you have to sit up and pay attention because your subconscious is actually telling you something very important about your finances and, depending on the context, your spiritual state. Heavy stuff. Most people would not admit to it, but most people are actually worried about money pretty much on a consistent basis. It sounds kind of crass to admit, but money is what makes the world go around. As much as we hate to admit it, we tend to rank each other based on how much money we make, and by extension, where we stand as far as the social pyramid of competency goes. No wonder, if you go to any kind of social situation, people will ask you what you do for a living. This really is a socially accepted way of asking where you are in this great social hierarchy. Status anxiety. There's a big difference between being a janitor and being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and being a doctor or somebody in the middle. Is it unfair? Is it arbitrary? Is it unjust? Well, we all know what the answer is. Life is unfair. This thing called social status and social hierarchy exists. Since money plays such a big role in our day-to-day psychic life, both waking and less than conscious, it's not a surprise at all to discover that it takes many different forms when it comes to our dreams. That's why when you have a dream of water leaking in a house, or if you find yourself dreaming of leaking ceiling pipes or there's something else involving leaking ceiling parts, this all tend to have something to do with either money or a deeper spiritual state. You just have to think about it hard enough. When you dream of water of any kind of fluid, this leaking from any part of your house indicates emotions, feeling of self-worth, self-confidence, and even identity. Again, heavy stuff. And right smack in the middle, of course, is something that calls your attention to your relationship with money. Your relationship with money. Since money plays such a big role in many different people's lives, this is a part of a series of dream imagery that you really can't run away from. Now, you may be imagining yourself as somebody who doesn't need money or somebody who is somehow free from the vulgar concerns of having to earn a living on a day-to-day basis. You'd rather focus on your creativity or, better yet, your spiritual life. I get all that. But for you to even afford that kind of luxury or live a life of privilege, you still have to have a material basis. And yes, I'm talking about the crass, everyday reality of cash. So we're back to square one. Whatever relationships you may have with this dirty day-to-day hustle of making money, thinking about money, and thinking of making it, welcome to the club. There's nothing dirty about it. In fact, it's the stuff of life. And maybe the reason why you're experiencing dream images of leaking water or any kind of leaks involving your home may indicate that you are quite insecure or have inner conflicts with your relationship with money. What does a leaking home mean? When you see water leak in a house or a part of a house, you are looking at your total psychic state. By psychic state, I'm talking about your spiritual side, your psychological side, as well as your emotions, mindsets, habits, and points of view. This, for lack of a better word, is your personal operating system. To use an analogy, when you look at different people from all over the world, we all have pretty much the same hardware. We have 2 sets of eyes, 2 arms, a face, a torso. We are powered by blood. I can go on down the line. When it comes to hardware, we're pretty much the same. But what makes us different in terms of our clothes, the food we choose to eat, the people we choose to hang out with, the languages that we choose to speak, and the things we choose to do on a day-to-day basis are what makes us human. It is not our similarity, but our differences that make us who we are. All of that difference is the function of software. And just like with computers, you can take 2 people with the same hardware but install different mental and psychic operating systems, and you have 2 totally different people. They look at the world differently. They feel differently about different things, and they can see the exact same collection of objective phenomena and walk away with 2 completely different interpretations. This leads, of course, to different decisions on a day-to-day basis. In other words, those 2 people that I've just described live different lives. What if I told you that those 2 people can start with the same bone-crushing poverty, and the same lack of material opportunities and end up in completely different places. One person doesn't go far, they're born with nothing and they end up with nothing. The other person dies a rich woman. What's the difference? Mindset. Your mindset determines your destiny. There's an old saying among rich people: I've been broke, but I've never been poor. A lot of people like to make fun of that, but it's very deep and it's very real. While you may not have much control over what you're born with or the initial place that you have to start with or the level of resources you have access to, you best believe you have a lot of choice when it comes to how you choose to respond to all of that. There are many cases of people who start off with just the shirt off their back. And I'm talking about the typical immigrant story in places like Hong Kong, the United States, Canada, Australia, and elsewhere. And within a generation, the family of that person owns whole industries. This is not an accident. Though we tell ourselves all sorts of comforting fictions regarding life and its outcomes, we try to abstract it away, and worse yet, we come up with really just highfalutin rationalizations as to why things are just decided by a roll of a dice. But let me tell you this. People who win the lottery are almost always going to lose that money because it's not the amount of cash that makes you rich. You can take a poor person and pour tens of millions of dollars into that person's life. And if she goes without the advice of a professional financial planner, you best believe that most of that cash will be gone in a short period of time. In many cases, lottery winners end up in a worse financial place than when they began. And I'm not just talking about lottery winners here. The same phenomenon plays itself out when it comes to NFL, NBA, and other professional athletes. What's going on here? Again, it's the mental operating system. Rich people can be broke. The typical rich person in the United States has declared bankruptcy at least twice. A lot of people were ribbing Donald Trump for declaring bankruptcy several times in his business career. But a typical rich person actually either flirted with bankruptcy and restructuring or went through the process. And usually they bounce back. Oftentimes they bounce back bigger, stronger, and better than ever. That's the power of their mental operating system. Since we're discussing the dreams of water leaking in a house, we have to look at the 800-pound elephant in the room. We have to look at it straight in the eye. Whatever you're struggling with when it comes to material and emotional issues, a lot of that flows from the mental operating system you have chosen to install. It's all a choice. Take ownership of it. One of the worst things that people could hear is to be told, actually it's more of a reminder, that they chose their life. They would go on and on why in a million years they wouldn't choose their existence. They would rattle off with strong emotions that they wouldn't choose their poverty. They wouldn't choose their abusive partner. They wouldn't choose to have kids. They wouldn't choose kids that don't love them. They wouldn't choose bosses that ignore them and don't value them. Again, I could go on and on. The list is endless. But what they're really saying is that says a lot, not so much to you, but to themselves. What they're really saying to themselves is, I refuse to take responsibility. I refuse to take ownership. Just as rich people and poor people may be born in the same square with the same absence of resources and end up in different places of their life, people who give themselves excuse after excuse to stay where they are, deep down inside know who the real cause of their situation is. It's not the uncle who molested you when you were a kid. It's not the father that was emotionally absent and couldn't care less whether you're alive or dead. It's not the mother who didn't hug you enough. It's not the first grade teacher who patted you on the back and told you that you can do whatever you want with your life. And it's not the best friend that broke your heart by sleeping with your girlfriend. It's none of those people. It's how you choose to respond to all of that. Most importantly is the inner script or the inner dialogue that forms every time you have an experience with the universe. And if you choose to ignore that dialogue, you no longer write your life. It's a script that plays out deep down inside, and it's a core part of your personal mental operating system. It's your inner narrative. And because you refuse to be aware of it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Just because you refuse to be aware of its existence doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact on you. People who give themselves excuse after excuse, and I'm talking about a wide range of people here, sometimes fall into this addictive fumes of luck. They just say, well, it's just a dice roll. There's nothing I could do about it. The universe is just a giant, cruel, unfeeling lottery. And then on the other hand, some people are caught up in religion, and I'm talking about the wrong kind of religion. Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating over one particular spiritual path over another. Instead, the wrong religion that I'm talking about focuses on the forms and somehow confuses them with substance. As Christ himself said, I demand mercy, not sacrifice. Have you become one of these people that have become so wrapped up in religiosity that you've lost sight of the living spirit of love that is supposed to fuel, animate, and inform your religion? So no matter how many candles you light, or how many times you get on your knees and pray, it's pointless because you're caught up in the tentacles of empty forms and rituals. There is no soul in it. And if there's no soul, there is no reality. So pick your poison. These are the refuges of people who refuse to take responsibility for their lives because some people refuse to take ownership of their power of choice. What does water represent? When you see water leaking in a house, and the house represents your total being, and I'm talking about your soul in a non-spiritual sense, the water represents emotion. Now you may be thinking, that's kind of shallow. Emotions, happiness, joy, anger, guilt. That's pretty shallow because you can easily list them out, identify them, draw neat or little lines around them. You might even think that you know where one ends and where one begins, but not so fast. This is just the surface of emotions. It's connected to something else that's deeper and harder to pin down. And just as you can observe on the ocean and easily understand the surface, the deeper you get from the upper levels, the harder it is to understand. Your emotional outbursts, your emotional coping mechanisms, and your day-to-day strategy of dealing with people come from somewhere, and it's not always easy to explain. In many cases, your mind seems to play tricks on you. You intend one thing, but you end up saying and doing things that are completely different. And here you are, stumped as to why this is the case. This is the kind of reality I'm talking about. It's harder to untangle, and there's a lot of chaos there. Because if all of this is easy to pick apart, much like a scientific equation, you wouldn't be reading this. You wouldn't be watching this video. You wouldn't be here. You'd be doing something else. A lot of ancient mythology has sprung up around this unknowable, unspeakable part of the human experience. This is the deep part that lays at the foundation of emotions. The emotional part is easy. Seriously, that's the easy part. After all, you can perceive it. You can describe it. So when you dream of any kind of water, whether you are swimming in a lake or you're trying to save a drowning friend, you're dealing with emotions, but more importantly, you're dealing with the unknown beneath those emotions. And believe it or not, your relationship with money is also a manifestation of these strong forces. So when you see an image of leaking pipes in a home or a burst water line or even water that has just accumulated because of a leak somewhere you can't find, you're ultimately dealing with this deeper source that's hard to pin down and hard to contain. While water can be frozen, it's harder to deal with leaks because you don't know where it begins. You don't know where it comes from. What you're left with are the consequences. In this type of situation, it helps to accept that this is part of you. Acceptance is a key step in ultimately attaining some sort of peace because this part is not controllable. It's so chaotic that it forms many different realities and it provides energy for different areas of your life. But in and of itself, it cannot be frozen. It cannot be sliced and diced and reduced into an equation. The only real control you can have over it is to acknowledge it. Stop denying it. Give it proper respect. And once you do that, further up the chain, things can become more manageable. The basics of sealing meaning and symbolism. When you are dreaming of water leaking from above, the first thing you'll be looking at is the ceiling. And sealing meaning and symbolism are actually pretty straightforward. This is the limit of what you imagine. This is the limit that you imagine for yourself. That's the definition or the meaning of ceilings in dreams. Pay attention to the word that I used. I used the word imagine. Human beings are so powerful in absolute terms that there's really no limit. But when you say this to somebody, their first instinct is to laugh at you. They say, how can you say that? I'm not making as much as I would like. I'm not having sex with the people that I truly desire. I don't have the kind of freedom that I would like to imagine for myself. What the hell are you even talking about? But the truth is we choose our limits. It's part of our spiritual operating system. And here's the clincher. That ceiling you imagine holding up the sky and containing your inner living space is arbitrary. It is set by you because you chose it. Again, people would put up a fight and say, look at my life. Look at my limitations. Did I choose it? This is crazy. I wouldn't choose this. Until and unless you man up, or if you're a female, woman up, nothing is going to change. Again, you cannot control what other people throw your way, but you can control how you respond. The fact that you kept taking the hit and you imagined the limit to be a certain point instead of another means you've chosen it. You've chosen to live with it. And that's the good news. Because if you can choose your reality to take a certain shape, you obviously can choose another reality. And again, this goes back to acknowledgement. Claim that you have the power to define and celebrate and exercise your life. That's how you move the ceiling up. That's how you stop water from the ceiling. The worst thing that you can do is to believe that all this leaking is just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it. When you do that, you become a prisoner of your emotions. But in reality, you are held down by what you choose to be real in your life. Everything that you think is real, from your spiritual nature, the symbols that make their way through your life, your family or your relationships, all of these are your choices. All of these are your constructions, vibrations from the truth that emanates from deep within you that you refuse to take control of and responsibility for. Use your imagination. Pay close attention to your dream of water leaks. Are you panicked? Do you feel that there's going to be some sort of flooding? Are you worried about potential repair costs? What exactly is going through your mind in your dream? Maybe you feel powerless and helpless. The truth is, as I keep repeating above, you are in control. And the reason why you feel that you are gripped by forces beyond your control, or forces that you can't quite describe, is a failure of imagination. A lot of people are under the impression that John Lennon's famous song, Imagine, is some sort of hippie anthem. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. What John Lennon is actually talking about is the power of imagination. Besides heaven and hell, there are other things that can be imagined. These things are expressed through imagination: taxes, justice, beauty, government, social contract. These aren't physical realities. They're products of imagination and definition. They're only as real as we make them out to be. And believe me, being arrested because you violated some crime is as real as it gets. Because when you feel those grave hours a day, they're real. But they all start out with imagination. Who told you that you have to live in a state where you have to follow a set of rules? Who told you that if you violate those certain rules, you need to show up in front of a judge? That's the power of imagination. And it's only real if you buy into it. And John Lennon is saying that if you can reclaim this power, because eventually we become prisoners of it, especially when he was talking about property. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. So when you see this powerful dream of leaking within your home, sit up and pay attention. Your subconscious is trying to tell you a very important truth about the sense of powerlessness that you feel deep down inside. Because you can, even if you are on your deathbed, still choose the world you inhabit. It's all a power of choice. We're all trapped in a prison of flesh. The imagination is the key that turns the door. And you may think that this is fanciful. You might even be dismissing this as the stuff of typical liberal arts college classrooms. But is it really? Because the things that you have resigned yourself to defining as everyday reality are just as imaginary as the equations of theoretical physics put up on a chalkboard. The consequences of your choices are just as real as you make them out to be. And how do you change this reality? Very simple. Make different choices. And it all starts, once again, with imagination. Imagine the world in a different way. You best believe that Bill Gates imagines the world a certain way, more along the lines as Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And if you're struggling to try to come up with a few coins day to day, it's because you're imagining things a different way. Springing water can definitely symbolize the vulgar reality of money. But please understand that money is a reflection of something deeper. Whatever it is you're struggling with, when it comes to money, it all can be traced back to spiritual truths, which is just a reflection of your imagination. Imagine your life a different way. Imagine that there are no limits. Imagine that you don't have to define yourself by your past. Imagine that you can forgive yourself and recreate yourself. Imagine that happiness is all a choice. Imagine that you can start all this change, as revolutionary as they may be to your daily waking life, right here, right now. Stop giving yourself excuses. Imagine a better life today.